Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras here with ILTV's Morning Briefing.
It's been a lively month over the holidays this year as clashes between Israeli security forces and Palestinians have left several dead, dozens injured, and dozens more arrested. Last night, violent clashes broke out in Nablus as Israeli security forces entered the area to secure the holy site of Joseph's tomb. The operation comes ahead of some 1,500 Jews who are expected to arrive at the holy site for the Sukkot holiday. 20 Palestinians, including 2 journalists, were reportedly injured by the IDF as they dispersed rioting crowds with rubber bullets, tear gas, and occasional live fire. Footage from the incident shows Palestinian rioters throwing stones and Molotov cocktails at the Israelis. Then, earlier this month, during the Rosh Hashanah holiday, 2 terrorists placed a bomb at a birdwatching site near Ad. The terrorists were later arrested by undercover border police and Shin Bet agents, and the suspects were identified as 2 18-year-olds from the West Bank village of Al-Mugayil. The suspicions against the suspects became very real when the bomb they planted exploded and damaged the site. Thankfully, though, while 40 families live in the Ad community, no one was hurt. Unfortunately, the terror didn't stop there. About a week later on Yom Kippur, an Arab man from a Palestinian village charged at a man near the old city with a screwdriver. After knocking the Jewish man down, he started running towards the police officers nearby, and he was shot and killed, and it was later found that he was in Jerusalem illegally. Earlier that day, 5 Arab suspects were arrested for disrupting worshippers arriving to the Temple Mount during Yom Kippur as well, and police said those arrested were members of the Hamas-related Shabab al-Aqsa terror group. United States President Donald Trump again made headlines this week after publicly endorsing the two-state solution as the best option for the first time. Trump made the comments Wednesday night in a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. The president also said his long-awaited Middle East peace plan will be delivered within the next 2 to 4 months, and the two leaders also spoke about regional issues with Iran, Syria, Russia, etc. But the endorsement of 2 states is still the biggest news, especially as Prime Minister Netanyahu reportedly knew about President Trump's new position. That being said, just hours later at a press conference, President Trump seemed to backtrack, going back to a position of supporting whatever solution the parties agree to. This has been the Trump administration's policy for a while now, though the United States at the same time has seemingly been isolating the Palestinians from the equation altogether. Most notably by shutting them out of Washington, cutting financial aid, and recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Trump claims, however, that these moves are to take the biggest chip off the table, i.e. Jerusalem, in order to clear the path for a real deal. As for Netanyahu's supposed support, it's true that the Prime Minister reiterated his stance on negotiating a two-state solution, but he also maintained that his definition of a state may differ from that which the Palestinians would agree to. Netanyahu told reporters that as long as he's Prime Minister, Israel will not give up on security control west of the Jordan. Meanwhile, however, as Netanyahu and Trump continued to talk about peace with the Palestinian mission to the UN was meeting with foreign ministers, diplomats, and representatives of over 40 countries and international organizations in efforts to circumnavigate the US's peace efforts entirely. Abbas discounted the United States under President Trump as a partner in peace ever since Trump's Jerusalem decision in December 2017. And now, at the United Nations event which was closed to the press, Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki said attendees held dialogue on how to, quote, overcome the current obstacles that were put in front of this process, both by the American administration and the Israeli government, end quote. But suffice it to say that unless negotiations actually occur between the Palestinians and Israel, neither party's plan is likely to take root. In other news from New York, Prime Minister Netanyahu continued his meetings at the United Nations General Assembly with leaders like Egyptian President al-Sisi and many others. With Sisi, the two met last night for roughly 2 hours to discuss regional developments and the situation in Gaza. Egypt had been moderating ceasefire negotiations between the Hamas terror group in Gaza and Israel until negotiations broke down again earlier this week. Hamas has since called for a resumption of violence, but Egypt does seem committed to brokering some sort of agreement. As for security to Israel's north, Netanyahu met and discussed threats from Syria, Iran, Lebanon, and other various terror groups, both with President Trump and United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. The Israeli Prime Minister then went on to discuss strengthening ties with Belgium and Guatemalan leaders Charles Michel and Jimmy Morales, and fighting anti-Semitism with Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz and Polish President Duda. This was the first meeting between Netanyahu and Duda since the crisis over Poland's Holocaust bill. Netanyahu was heavily criticized for seeming to capitulate to Poland in return for a watered-down version of the bill, which threatened anyone who blamed Poland for Holocaust war crimes with jail time. And now, even more criticisms have erupted, especially after the Israeli Prime Minister declined an invitation from UNESCO to come to a conference on anti-Semitism. Israel and the United States left the organization in 2017, and Netanyahu said that while he commends all efforts to combat anti-Semitism, he'd refused the UNESCO invitation due to UNESCO's, quote, persistent and egregious bias against Israel, end quote. In a statement issued from the Prime Minister's office, he said UNESCO must do more than host a conference on anti-Semitism. It must stop practicing it too. On Sunday night, Spanish journalist Julio de la Guardia slammed his car into 31-year-old ultra-Orthodox musician Chaim Tukachinsky, killing him in a hit-and-run drunk driving accident. And now, it's also been revealed that the suspect had actually already been deported from Israel for beating and injuring his wife during a domestic dispute. La Guardia had been living in Israel in 2011 and working as a correspondent for several Spanish outlets, but was deported after the incident with his wife. Authorities are still investigating how he was reissued a new work visa and allowed to return to Israel. Worse still, since returning to Israel, La Guardia has reportedly been living and working under a fake name for Iranian television. As we reported yesterday, La Guardia hit Tukachinsky in Jerusalem's Paris Square on Sunday, killing him. Tukachinsky had been walking home from the Western Wall after the first night of the Sukkot holiday when he was run over by La Guardia, who later fled the scene. La Guardia was located 90 minutes later in the Mount Scopus area, and his breathalyzer tests showed that his blood alcohol content was 3 times higher than the legal limit. On Monday night, La Guardia was released to house arrest, but was subsequently denied house arrest when it was discovered that he would spend it at the home of the Spanish consul. A new bill passed in 2011 in Israel, doubling the punishment for hit-and-run drivers to 14 years in prison. Time will tell how or if the new evidence against him will affect the case, but either way, it's scheduled to resume today.
That's all for now. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.